and welcome to Outdoor Photography Guide Live. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this live event, Tamron, so thanks for sponsoring us. As you can see, I am alone in the studio once again, and that is because Ian Plant is in the Faroe Islands and we're calling him in this morning. So Ian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Actually, I'm here with Erez Marom. Now, you might, those of you who saw my live from Uganda event might recognize Erez. He popped in briefly to say hello. And today, we're going to make this all about him. I'm going to interview him about his photography. But we arrived in the Faroe Islands this morning for us, I guess this afternoon, actually. So it's morning for a lot of viewers in the US. I took the red eye to get here, and so I haven't had any sleep. And I arrived safely, but my luggage did not, which means that tonight I get to go shopping for clean underwear. Yes, this is indeed the glamorous life of a professional landscape photographer. We are currently coming to you live from a gas station.
Oh.
Well, we were going to do something outside in the beautiful scenery, but it's raining. So we stopped here. I believe Erez just had a gas station kebab. How was that, Erez?
That was pretty good. I mean, I love the hot dogs. In Scandinavia and the Faroes. So
excellent. Yeah, well, this is the glamorous life of a professional landscape photographer. It's all champagne wishes and caviar.
Michelin restaurants, Michelin kebabs.
So we wish we had a more exciting location, and we're going to do our best. It's actually pretty quiet here at this gas station, so we're going to do our best to do this interview and to do this live event without any interruptions. But we're here today with Erez, and we're going to talk to him about his experience as a landscape photographer and some of his favorite images as well. So Erez, why don't you tell the live audience here a little bit about yourself? You are from Israel, correct?
I am from Israel.
Okay. And how long have you been a professional photographer?
Professional about 7 or 8 years, and full-time professional about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So when I first turned pro, I had a friend who had been a professional for a long time, and he told me that the average length of time that it took to actually make a profit as a professional photographer was about 7 to 8 years. Now, do you find that to be true, or have you managed to?
Well, I am a Jew, so. So profit was immediate. No, I'm just kidding.
Way to reinforce stereotypes.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of people tell me, you know, you were so brave. I actually, I used to be an engineer, a scientist. I worked in the Israeli high-tech industry before I took a 180-degree turn and went to professional nature photography. But I didn't do it all that fast. I did it very gradually. I started with teaching in Israel, and then I started guiding abroad. And I did 1 workshop, then 2, then 3 every year. And it was a very slow transition into professional landscape photography. And then when it reached the stage where I couldn't work as a lecturer in Tel Aviv University or in high tech, that's when I knew that I needed to go full-time pro. And yeah, by that stage, I was already making enough money to sustain myself.
That's a pretty common story, myself included. A lot of the photographers I know, they started out doing something else. A lot of them were professionals, and they made a lateral move into becoming a professional photographer. So that's now been 5 or 6 years as a full-time pro. And you are leading tours and workshops all around the world. I know you lead tours here in the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland. You're also going to Patagonia, Namibia. Yeah. Anywhere else?
Did you say Greenland?
I did say Greenland, yes. Greenland, yeah. Lots of stuff in the North Atlantic.
Yeah. That's about it, I think.
Norway as well, right?
Yep.
And
most
Norway.
Of the nice islands in Norway. Yep. I have several workshops every year. I try to mix them up a little bit. I try to keep my passion going as you should, not do the same thing every year. I do the Faroe Islands, the Lofoten Islands every year, and Greenland every year, but the rest of the locations I try to mix up. And next year is going to be the first year since 2011. I will not come to Iceland. I have other plans, and I will not do Patagonia because I'm going to Indonesia. And Ian and I are going to Mongolia in winter.
We are going to be in Mongolia in February because I decided that Minneapolis in February isn't cold enough, that I want to have even colder weather. So yeah, we're going to be doing that. We're going to be huddled in a ger, trying to stay
in
warm.
One sleeping bag.
It's the only way to stay warm when you're in Mongolia.
with a sheep.
Hey, get your own sheep.
Oh, don't get Middle Eastern on me.
So why don't we talk about some of your photos? I picked a few of the photos that you've taken over the years that are some of my personal favorites, and I'd love to discuss those. The first one, and Lilia, let me know if I've got the same order that you guys have. The first one should be an image that is taken from inside an ice cave. It looks like a glacier.
Looks about right to me.
All right, fantastic. So, Erez, why don't you tell us a little about that image, where it was taken, and any special photography techniques you used for it?
Right. Well, first of all, Ian, from seeing the images, I can see that your favorites of my shots are my favorites of my own shots, which is a really good sign.
Well, that just worked out perfectly then. That's great. That means they must be good.
That means they must be the best, for sure. So this image was taken in southern Iceland in my first visit to Iceland in 2011, December 2011, a long, long time ago, before I was a professional or an aspiring pro. And this is the insides of an ice cave. And the amazing thing about this was we arrived there, we were totally alone. I mean, today, if you have an ice cave like this in Iceland, you will have more than 100 tourists in it, most probably, and it will not stay the same. But back in 2011, it was absolutely desolate. There was no one there. There was no one on the road when we got there. We took my good friend Orvar to guide us, and he brought us to this ice cave. And this ice cave was amazing. It had openings on both sides, and it was facing south. And in Iceland, in December, the sunrise and sunset are in the south because it's far north. It's subarctic, but almost in the Arctic. So this was actually sunrise. And if this opening is facing south, then southeast, where the sun comes from, is to the left. And you can see that the rising sun casts the light on the right side of the cave, and that light got reflected on the left side of the cave, together with the blue sky. So you have those incredibly beautiful melting patterns on the left of the cave, illuminated by reflected light off of the side of the cave, off of the right side of the cave.
This looks to me like it's a very wide-angle shot.
Yeah,
is that true?
Absolutely. It's taken with a 14mm Samyang on the 5D Mark II, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember the 5D Mark II. It was a long time ago.
Well, this was taken a long time ago. And this was actually taken with, not as complex technique as I do today. If I had shot this today, I would have focus stacked. But this is an HDR. This is made out of 3 shots, and a bright one, medium, and a dark one for the sky. And I basically manually blended them. I never do HDRs automatically. I always manually blend them to get the most natural look that I can.
So when you say manually blended, you mean that you blended them together in Photoshop using layers and masks?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, well, the next image that we're going to show is my absolute 100% #1 favorite of yours. And this is a shot, I believe, from the Lofoten Islands of Norway. Yep. And I just love the patterns that you found in the sand. They look like they might be trees or maybe fingers reaching forward. So I really love this composition. And I really enjoy the fact that you shot this in gloomy, overcast light. This would have been great, obviously, if you had stunning sunrise or sunset light. But I think that the fact that you use this very stormy weather creates a mood that makes this very unique, in my opinion. But why don't you tell me a little bit more about this image and what happened when you were making the shot?
Absolutely. I mean, this is definitely one of my favorites as well. First of all, I didn't mention that I really find it important to give images titles. So the previous image was Nautilus because of the Nautilus shape.
Nautilus shape, yeah.
And this is called Torment. And so this is naturally because of the sand patterns that look like hands in the Inferno or whatever.
Reaching out.
Reaching out. So this was taken in Lofoten a few years ago when I was guiding, and this was taken in my favorite location in Lofoten, which is Skagesanden Beach. And this beach is very special because it has black and white sand, and the white sand is lighter than the black. But when there is water coming from the nearby mountains, the white sand tends to slip off of the black sand, and this creates those beautiful patterns. And the beautiful thing about this beach is that every time you go there, it's absolutely different. It has different patterns, different foregrounds to shoot with. And it's an amazing thing because as a landscape photographer, for me, it's extremely important to try to shoot changing landscapes as much as possible. So the three first pictures we're going to show today, the first showed ice, the second shows sand, and the third will show lava, which are the three kinds of changing landscapes that I
Spoiler alert, the next image shows lava.
Yeah.
How are we doing, Lily? Are we still on?
We're still doing good.
All right, fantastic.
Right.
Just wanted to double check. And I think this image illustrates a point that I often make about looking for a good foreground for your landscape images. It's important to have a compelling foreground, something that's going to lead the eye from near to far in the composition. And a foreground can be just about anything, as long as it has an interesting and compelling shape. It can be something as simple as patterns in sand. So you don't have to really look for the most interesting thing you can find for a good foreground. A good foreground can be something that's literally at your feet. It can be a few inches in size. I'm guessing that you got very low, very close, and that these were maybe just 6 or 8 inches long.
This was something like this.
Yeah. Okay.
Very,
maybe
very
more like
small.
a foot. Yeah. So something very, very small. If you get low and close and wide angle lens, can
Super
become
low.
very prominent in your composition.
I got super low, super close. I used the Canon 11 to 24 on 11 millimeters, so I can go super close and get that sense of depth that's a good foreground with good leading of the eye can give you.
All right.
Yeah, it was pretty gloomy, but I think it kind of contributed to the overall feel of Torment.
Well, let's move on from Torment, and we'll see what the next image has to show us. So tell us about this. We know already that it's lava. Perhaps you can tell us what the name of this photo is, and then just give us a little bit of the backstory.
All right, so this image is called Double Dragon, which is a reference to a video game I used to play in the 80s. But it looks very fitting because this looks like a dragon with 2 heads, and this was shot with a drone. This is an aerial, obviously, of Kilauea volcano in Hawaii, in Big Island. This is one of the best trips in my life. I did it with my good friend Daniel Hausman. And
this trip was last year. It's not the current eruption. This was last year. So in the past year, the volcano has been rather active. There were a lot of breakouts. And now in the past few months, there was, of course, a big eruption that occurred. But this was before the big eruption.
This was a little bit more than a year ago. Actually, a guide you recommended, Eric from Kilauea.
Erez Marom. Yeah, great guy.
Absolutely great guy.
He's actually famous now because there's a National Geographic story about him. He had left a GoPro on the ground and the lava consumed it, but the footage remained. Yeah. So some of you might have seen that story on National Geographic times. Yeah.
So the day after Daniel and I arrived in Hawaii, we met Eric. And as soon as we met him in the car park, he said, listen, you guys are really lucky. There are really good surface flows outside of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, which means you can shoot with a drone legally. And so we took the drones, we hiked about 5 miles to get there. There was beautiful surface flow action going on. We shot throughout the afternoon, evening, twilight, and a little bit in the dark. And it was incredible. in the middle of our visit, I was, I don't know, cleaning my equipment or something like that. Daniel was shouting at me, Erez. I looked up, a river of lava just burst out of the mountainside and created this this lava flow. And yeah, it certainly was one of the best trips in my life. And shooting this and similar photos, I actually melted my drone. The drone came back. It was quite hot. And then when we came back to the apartment we were in, I looked at the camera and it was totally molten inside. And that made it quite famous, actually. It broke the internet, more or less. It was on the first page of natgeo.com and in a lot of places.
See, I had the exact same thing happen to me the year before I'd been there. So when I saw your story on natgeo.com, I thought you had stolen my story. But it turns out that you just had the same thing happen to you.
Well, it turns out you snooze, you lose.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a beautiful adventure. One of the best trips ever.
Yeah, and you know, Eric, the guide, I love his last name, Storm. I'm thinking of changing my name so that I'm Ian Storm from now on, because I think it's a really appropriate name for a landscape photographer. Ian Plant is kind of lame to me. But let's move on to the next.
You can put Thunder as your middle name.
Ian Thunder. Oh, well, actually, why don't I get rid of Ian and just call myself Thunderstorm? I think that's pretty awesome. But why don't we move on to the next photo? And this one looks like it's on fire, but it's not actually lava this time. This time it's a stunning sunset, correct? Or the midnight sun, actually.
It is, yeah, it is sunrise, actually.
Okay, all right.
But sunrise and sunset in Arctic Greenland in July are practically
pretty much
same.
the same thing.
Pretty much the same. So this has been taken in Greenland in 2014. Yeah, we were sailing. I was preparing to guide my annual Greenland workshop. So I came scouting and I was sailing on a yacht, and it was becoming quite clear that from the clouds, you could see that it was going to be an incredible sunrise, sorry. And then we kept sailing. There was a lot of ice moving all around. The beautiful thing about Disko Bay is that it's very, very still. And when there's a lot of ice in the foreground, when the icebergs crumble and there's a lot of ice everywhere, it tends to break down the waves and create beautiful reflections. So this is what happened here. I found a foreground piece of ice. We have the background iceberg. And again, a good image needs a foreground, background, and leading of the eye from the foreground to the background. And if you have a beautiful sunrise like this, it's a definite advantage.
Yeah, definitely. Having that visual relationship, that juxtaposition of something close and something farther away creates a lot of visual energy, and it really helps make your compositions more dynamic. And when we say foreground, it doesn't always literally have to be the stuff at your feet. You know, in this case, it was something floating in the water, probably 5 or 10 feet away from where you were in the boat. So a little bit farther away, but it's still creating that near-far visual juxtaposition, which is so important to creating dynamic landscape compositions.
And the sense of depth.
Yes, exactly. So Lilia, any questions that we need to address at the moment?
We have a variety of questions, but I was just waiting for some relevant ones. If you would like me to just throw one at you, I can, by all means. Would you like a question?
Perfect time for it.
All right. Michael asks, in case you're using Lightroom, how do you treat, in parentheses, review, culling, keywording, HDR, and pano shots, among other non-HDR and pano shots?
Okay, I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. Could you read that to me again?
All right, we'll do it one more time. In case you're using Lightroom, how do you treat HDR and pano shots, among other non-HDR and pano shots?
Well, HDR and Lightroom, I process images with ACR, which has the same functionality like Lightroom.
Adobe Camera Raw.
Yeah, Adobe Camera Raw. And actually, if you want to manually HDR panoramas, you can do that by first merging the panoramas and then merging the HDR. Actually, you can do all that now in Camera Raw. Layers of brightness, the panoramas, 3 the different brightness panoramas, and then I would manually HDR in Photoshop.
Right.
That's how I would do it.
Yeah, and you can do both in Lightroom. You can do a merge to HDR to blend exposures automatically, or you can do a merge to panorama to blend multiple shots, create a panoramic image. And what Lightroom will do is create a raw file that is output from either of those. So you'll actually get a DNG file, which is a raw format file. So you have the advantages of being able to then make adjustments to that raw file the way you would any other raw file. So why don't we move on to your next photo? And this is, of my 5 favorites of yours, this is probably my second favorite image. But I think a lot of people are going to think it's the best of the bunch. So I guess we're saving the best for last. And then we'll move on to a few images from the Faroes, just so people know what we'll be shooting for the next 10 days. But this next image, once again, we're going back to fire, and this is another volcanic eruption. So tell us about this.
Yeah, this was another magical trip, this time in Iceland in 2014. This is not the very famous Eyjafjallajökull volcano that erupted. Yeah, I worked a lot.
Now,
I worked a lot to be able to say that.
I'm impressed that he can say that, but actually, I don't know if he even said it right or not. He could just say random string of syllables.
I got an A+ from Icelanders for saying that. I worked long and hard to be able to say that.
They're just being polite.
So I'm going to say it again. I can say it 3 times in a row.
Okay, do it. Do it.
Eyjafjallajökull, Eyjafjallajökull, Eyjafjallajökull.
Okay.
All right. So this is not Eyjafjallajökull.
That was the eruption that was made very famous in the Secret Life of Walter Mitty, starring Ben Stiller.
So this is not it, right?
There's a great scene from that movie where Sean Penn is strapped to the top of an airplane photographing the volcano. So when people ask me what it's like to be a professional nature photographer, I refer to them to that scene and say it's exactly like that. It's just like, notwithstanding the fact that we're currently in a gas station, usually we're strapped to the top of a plane flying into a volcano. So sorry, go ahead, Erez.
So I mean, it wasn't that far away from that. So this is the Holuhraun eruption. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It's Icelandic. My mother tongue is Hebrew.
Icelandic.
Sufficiently good. Anyway. This was a very big eruption in 2014. One of I think the biggest in the last 200 years in Iceland. And it covered the area the size of Manhattan. The lucky thing was it was in the middle of the Icelandic desert in the highlands. And this is a helicopter shot. So I saw that this volcano erupted. It went on for like 6 months. And about a month or 2 after it erupted, I decided to go there because I couldn't resist. It was quite an expensive trip, and the heli flight was very expensive, but I couldn't resist it. And this was a very problematic trip because the Icelandic government or the Disaster Control Bureau closed off the area. And in order to get there by land, I needed to get a letter of intent from a magazine or something like that. And luckily I had connections with National Geographic who gave me a letter of intent. I also had to get an Icelandic guide, which was a problem because all of my Icelandic friends were in Greenland, of course, at the same exact time. So I really worked hard to find them. And then I found a friend of a friend of a friend to take me there.
And you know what they say in Iceland? What happens in Greenland stays in Greenland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or in the Faroes.
Right.
And so it was really hard to find someone. And then when I got there, of course, Iceland there, I lost my luggage. So I had to buy all my equipment again. And then we drove like 10 hours to the location. We shot it from the ground, which was beautiful. And then I wanted to shoot it from a helicopter. There was a helicopter that was taking off daily or several times a day from the farm that I was staying in. And I told them to book me on the next flight. But then a few flights were booked. And the next few days, like 2 or 3 days, they couldn't fly because of sandstorms. So I ended up staying in the same farm 4 days, eating nothing but mutton soup. Mutton soup, yeah. the same mutton soup. I think I ate it 8 days straight.
Mutton soup is great the first time you have it.
The first time,
by
the second time.
By the fourth time.
By the 14th time, it's not that great, believe me. But after 4 days, I secured my helicopter flight. But then I wanted to find a partner because that flight was going to cost about more than 2,500 euros, which is about $3,000. So I was trying to find a partner to join me. And I was asking everyone, and no one wanted, because I wanted to do extra time above the lava to get better shots. And then I found a nice guy that was sitting there with his wife. And that's actually Daniel, who was with me in Hawaii too. That's where I met him. Apparently he came to Iceland just for a trip with his wife, completely unrelated to the volcano. And then he heard about the volcano, decided to go there, and that's where I met him.
So you guys are lava buddies.
We are totally heli lava buddies, absolutely. So we did the heli flight, and it was an incredible flight. First of all, as you can see on the image, there was an astounding sunset. And then you see this lava flow in the foreground. This was new. The helicopter pilot told us this is the first time he sees that, and he has been there several times that day. So this was absolutely new lava flow, and it created just an incredible foreground. And it's very hard to grasp the scale, but this is square kilometers, what we're seeing. It is just absolutely gigantic. Yeah.
No, this is I really enjoy this composition. I like the way the curve of the lava takes you from the foreground to the background.
I asked the heli pilot to move to do the same flight over this part like 3-4 times. I must have driven him crazy, but I mean, it's paid. Absolutely.
Before we go into the next photo, I'm going to interject with a quick question. Sue asks, can you explain what shooting in RAW is as opposed to manual mode?
Oh, well, so RAW and manual mode aren't really related. A RAW file is a different kind of digital file. So you have two choices when you're shooting with a digital camera. You can either shoot RAW or JPEG. So a JPEG is a compressed image format that has some presets applied regarding saturation and contrast and color management. And a RAW format file is uncompressed. It is literally the raw data that the camera records. So it's a different format. It's for more advanced users who want to have a little bit more control over how the final image looks. So that's the RAW and JPEG are the two formats you have, basically.
All right.
All right. Well, so we also have a few images that Erez has taken in the Faroes over the past few years. And if you guys want to just kind of scroll through those photos, I don't think we need to talk about them in depth. Basically, this is my first trip to the Faroes, but Erez has been here several years, and we're going to be here. I'm going to be here for 10 days, and he's going to be here for 2 weeks. I'm going to be leaving on the 10th, flying home, and then heading up to the Canadian Arctic to photograph polar bears. But the scenery here is really fantastic. We're just hoping that the weather will cooperate and we'll get some lucky light breaking through here and there. We've got a little bit of time to answer a few questions before we need to head out. And it's interesting for sunset, or at least keep our fingers crossed that the light will break and we'll get some good shots. So why don't we go ahead and answer a few questions and then wrap things up?
All right, I have a few questions already in the chat, but by all means, start asking some more and we'll try and answer them in the time that we have. Our first question is from Jim, who asks, do you use back button focus? Why or why not?
Okay, yes, I will use back button focus when I'm shooting wildlife. The advantage of back button focus is that if you're working with a moving subject and you're using a tracking autofocus mode, whenever you press the button, the autofocus will track the subject. Whenever you take your finger off the back button, it'll stop tracking. So that way, if you're tracking a moving subject and it stops moving and you're waiting for the moment for something to happen, you can turn the tracking off. That way you have the shot in focus, and if you recompose or if you're sitting there waiting for a little while, the camera's not going to be hunting for something. And so it just gives you a little bit more control over recomposing your images when you're photographing wildlife. So if you're using the front button focus, it's going to be tracking as soon as you press the shutter, it's going to start hunting for the subject. The autofocus is going to turn back on. And so if your subject is not moving around, it might start hunting for something. It might have some difficulty. So you can't lock the focus in if you're using the front button focus. So the back button focus allows you to essentially lock the focus in and recompose as necessary.
All right. This is a question specifically for Ian. Vasantha asks, I remember you mentioning using the Tamron 16 to 300 millimeter lens for your landscape work in one of your earlier programs. I would appreciate if you could share your thoughts about this lens, the strengths and weaknesses. Thank you.
Well, so that's a lens that is for the crop sensor cameras. I've used it in the past. I don't really use crop sensor cameras, but I did use this lens on assignment many years ago. So I haven't used it, I'm not even sure if they've got a more current version out. And, it was a perfectly fine lens, the one I used several years back, but I don't know if it's been updated, and I can't really speak to it because I shoot with full frame cameras and I shoot with their full frame lenses for the most part. So this was something that I did on assignment years ago, but, it seemed to work just fine for me.
All right. Here's a broader question. I know we talked about this a little earlier when you were starting the interview, but Brianna asks, what made you passionate about outdoor photography?
Well, Erez, why don't you answer this one?
Being a photographer is an amazing career. It takes you around. It lets you see and experience so many different places, so many different environments, so many different things. Just a few weeks ago, Ian and Zach invited me to go with them, tag along and see and shoot the gorillas. And that's something I would never have done if I wasn't a photographer.
Yeah, and if those of you who was with Zach Mills, who is another one of my photography friends. And so I interviewed him while we were in Uganda last.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so, you guys have seen my lava shots. I would never be able to see these amazing spectacles if I weren't a nature photographer, and I'm extremely thankful for it, and I get paid for it, which is
always a plus.
Amazing. So I think if you like nature, if you like beauty, if you're a visual person, being outside and seeing all these amazing things, different colors, different moods, different landscapes, heat, cold, ice, lava, sand, sunsets, northern lights, all of that. If you're curious about the intricacies and beauty of our world, then you have to be outside. You have to go out and travel the world and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, being an outdoor photographer allows you to travel to exotic locations and visit their gas stations. So, I think we have time for a few more questions.
All right, I have one more in the queue, so hopefully you guys think of some really good questions while we're answering this one. But in reference to the shots that we looked at, David asks, what kind of drone was used for the lava shot?
It was a Phantom 4 Pro.
Quick answer, so not a lot of time to think of a new question. But good, concise. Do you guys have anything else to talk about your trip, what you're hoping to shoot, anything else?
No, I think we are going to go ahead and wrap things up early because we only have a little bit of time before sunset. So it is, about 2:30 now local time, and so we have less than an hour and a half until the sun is gone. The days are very short here. We are hoping to get some good aurora activity over the next few days, and we're hoping to get some breaks in the clouds so we can photograph the aurora. And of course, we're always hoping to get stunning sunrises and stunning sunsets. Normally, I would say that as a landscape photographer, you don't really get that much sleep, but when you're working in the North Sea in the winter, you get plenty of sleep. Well, we've got very, very short days, very, very long nights. So this is actually like a vacation for us as far as I'm concerned. It's a lot easier shooting in the winter than it is during the summer.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll get some great shots. And if I do, I'll be sharing them in the next exciting episode of OPG Live. I want to thank everyone for their questions. I want to thank everyone for watching this episode. I want to thank Tamron, our sponsor. I'll be shooting with Tamron's new 15 to 30 millimeter Generation 2 lens on this trip. So I'm excited to see how that works out. And as always, I hope that you guys can get out there. I hope that this program has inspired you and has given you some new tools and techniques that will help you improve your photography. So just get out there shoot as much as you can, do the best that you can, and I'll be here to answer your questions next time. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Bye.
Bye.